Hey guys, tonight we wander down a fog-choked London street where lamplight hovers like warm butter over cobblestones slick with yesterday's rain. You're here early, before the bakers even open their shutters, before the milk carts start rattling, and your boots already sound like a metronome of obligation. You're a Victorian postman, wrapped in a thick wool coat that somehow manages to be both itchy and cold, trudging through the gray dawn with a bag of someone else's secrets. You probably won't survive this shift without at least 3 blisters and 1 unsolicited encounter with a suspicious goose, but that's part of the charm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The day begins at 5 a.m. when the city still sleeps and the gas lamps hiss like tired dragons. You can smell yesterday's coal smoke still clinging to the air. There's a sort of poetry in the routine. You collect your satchel, count your letters, and tuck them neatly inside, already feeling the leather strap biting into your shoulder. Each envelope has that crisp paper smell, a promise of something more interesting than the porridge waiting at home. You make your way past the row houses, each identical as a soldier in formation, except for the rare splash of a red door or a cat glaring from a windowsill. The city's waking up slowly, one cough, one kettle whistle at a time. You know every shortcut, every loose paving stone, and exactly which houses have doormats that will swallow your boot if you step wrong. Historically, the uniform was designed for both respectability and practicality. Dark blue wool, brass buttons polished bright enough to catch the weak sunlight, a cap tilted just so, because even the most underpaid government servant deserved a bit of swagger. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. You were the face of the state, trusted enough to hold people's private words, and visible enough to be blamed if they didn't arrive on time. There's a pride in the work, even if the pay is barely enough to afford decent boots. Still, being a postman in the 1850s meant you were part of something enormous, the bloodstream of an empire that depended on ink and envelopes. Letters from India, telegrams from Scotland, birthday cards that took a week to travel 20 streets. You handle them all. The words of lovers, bankers, and bored aristocrats. Every so often, you glance up and notice the fog thickening, blurring the world into a soft watercolor. You can't tell where the Thames begins and the sky ends. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls 6. The sound drifts through the mist like a reminder that you're late already. Victorian punctuality was a cruel mistress. The post office's official motto could have been, "Hurry quietly." A curious historical fact, postmen back then were forbidden to whistle. Management believed it distracted from the dignity of their office and startled household pets. Still, most ignored the rule when no one was watching. After all, a little off-key tune helped drown out the ache of frozen fingers. By the time you reach the last house on the first street, you've already been splashed by a passing carriage, barked at by 3 dogs, and mistaken for a burglar by 1 overly alert maid. You tip your cap anyway. Manners cost nothing, even when you're drenched. Historians still argue whether London's early postal routes were designed for efficiency or simply mapped to match the whims of upper-class neighborhoods. Either way, your path never makes much sense. It zigzags through alleys, doubles back across bridges, and occasionally sends you past the same pub twice, which feels almost intentional. You suspect some clerk in a warm office planned it that way just to amuse himself. You stop at a corner and pull out a letter addressed in neat looping script. Mrs. Haversham, Camden Town. You imagine her waiting by the window, teacup in hand, heart racing at the sound of footsteps. The thought makes you smile. You're not just a courier. You're a witness to invisible moments of anticipation. And when the wind shifts, carrying the smell of bread from a nearby bakery, you decide this might actually be the best part of the job. For a brief second, everything is quiet. No rattling carts, no shouting vendors, just the steady rhythm of your boots and the promise of warmth at the next doorstep. It's then you realize the city has its own heartbeat, and you're one of the few who get to feel it pulse under your feet every morning. There's something strangely comforting about that, something worth getting up for, even on the coldest day of the year.
The morning fog thins, replaced by the faint golden light of a reluctant sun. By now, your stomach has begun to grumble, in eloquent protest against too many miles and too little breakfast. The world feels softer after 9 o'clock. The rush of delivery slows, the streets loosen their grip on urgency, and the scent of toasted bread becomes an irresistible form of persuasion. You turn a corner toward the sorting office courtyard, where the real ritual begins, the sacred mid-morning tea break. You know the scene before you see it. Steam curling from tin mugs, crumbs of stale scones scattered like confetti on a bench, and 5 men arguing good-naturedly about who gets the clean spoon. Someone hums an off-key version of God Save the Queen. You drop your satchel beside theirs, roll your shoulders, and join the small rebellion of rest. Tea, in this moment, is everything. Not just a drink, it's defiance in liquid form. The act of boiling water and waiting is an assertion that you, the humble postman, still have control over something in a world built on timetables and orders. You pour it slow, watching the steam rise like a ghost of the morning's fog. The first sip is a small miracle, bitter, earthy, and just hot enough to make you forget your aching feet. One of your mates, old Percy, with the crooked smile, starts telling the tale of how he once delivered a letter to Charles Dickens himself. He answered the door. I swear it, Percy insists, eyes wide. Ask me if the postmen ever read the letters they carried. You all laugh, but silently agree to yes, you sometimes do. If only the outside, if only to imagine the stories within. Historically, the Victorian postal service prided itself on discipline and efficiency. Postmen were expected to walk up to 15 miles a day, their shifts punctuated by exactly 2 sanctioned breaks. But those few minutes of tea were less about rest and more about identity. Here, class barriers blurred for a heartbeat. Clerks, messengers, and carriers all huddled together, gossiping about politicians, ghosts, and the price of mutton. You take another sip and let your mind wander. Across London, tens of thousands of people are doing the same thing right now. Tea as the glue that holds the empire together. Historians still argue whether the British postal workers' tea culture began as a necessity or a quiet act of defiance against the machine-like tempo of industrial life. You pretty sure it's both. There's a quiet comedy to this little world. Someone always manages to spill tea on their trousers. Someone always complains about the milk being too warm. And there's always that one chap, today it's Bennett, who tries to toast his bread over the sorting room stove and nearly sets the handle on fire. You all cheer anyway, because it's been a dull week and excitement comes cheap. Beyond the laughter, though, the conversations carry tiny sparks of revolution. The postmen talk about fair pay, shorter routes, maybe even forming a union. The thought feels dangerous, thrilling, like whistling in a cathedral. You say nothing, but you listen closely. Later, when you're trudging through rain again, you'll remember their words and wonder if they'll ever change anything. A little-known fact. Many early postal workers used the hollow handles of their satchels to smuggle extra letters. Private deliveries paid under the table by impatient lovers or discreet businessmen. It wasn't exactly legal, but it was lucrative enough to buy an occasional slice of cake to go with the tea. You glance at the clock. 15 minutes gone. Percy groans, stretching his back with a noise like old hinges. Back to it, lads, he says as though commanding an army. The mugs clatter, the spoons are pocketed, and you shoulder your bag once more. The courtyard empties, leaving behind the faint scent of tannins and camaraderie. As you step out into the light, you feel steadier, anchored. The city seems less hostile now. Its noise is softer, almost rhythmic. A mother calls a child in for lunch, a horse snorts at the curb, and somewhere a church bell chimes 11. You adjust your cap, smile at a passing milkman, and set off toward the next neighborhood, warmed not by the sun, but by the quiet power of routine. It's strange. No one will ever write songs about postmen's tea breaks, but maybe they should. There's a quiet heroism in the pause, in the shared laughter over a chipped mug, in the decision to keep walking afterwards. You think of that as you turn another corner, your shadow stretching ahead like a promise that the day will keep going, and so will you.
By midday, the letters grow heavier, or maybe your arms simply tire from the constant rhythm of reaching, knocking, and handing over bits of other people's hearts. The sun, weak as watered milk, peers through the soot-streaked sky and throws pale light across the rows of terraced houses. You've begun to notice patterns in the handwriting. Who loops their Y's with a flourish? Who dots their I's like they're in a hurry? You could almost guess the contents without opening a single envelope. You carry not just ink on paper, but the weight of words that can change a life before the kettle finishes boiling. A letter from a soldier home from the Crimea, a pink-tinted note scented faintly of lavender, a stern notice stamped overdue account. Each slip of folded paper feels alive with someone's hope or dread. A mainstream historical fact floats in your mind as you sort through the stack. In 1840, the penny post was introduced, 1 penny to send a letter anywhere in the country. It transformed Britain almost overnight. Suddenly lovers could write daily, friends could stay connected across counties, and businesses could run on written promises instead of unreliable messengers. You're walking proof of that revolution. Boots worn thin, heart a little thickened by what you've seen. You remember Mrs. Willoughby, the elderly widow who waits every Tuesday for a letter that never comes. Her son promised to write from the colonies, but hasn't in months. Still, she waits by the door, lace cap trembling, eyes searching your hands. "Anything today?" she asks, and you lie gently, saying, "Perhaps tomorrow, ma'am." You've learned that a little kindness weighs less than truth. The postman's bag is a strange thing. It can hold joy and ruin in the same handful. Sometimes you hesitate before slipping an envelope through the slot, as though by delaying a few seconds you can soften whatever blow lies inside. Other times you catch yourself smiling, imagining the squeal of delight when someone reads, "Yes, I will marry you." There's an old superstition among your colleagues: never drop a letter on the ground. It's bad luck, they say, and invites misfortune for both sender and carrier. A silly notion, maybe, but you never test it. The world feels delicate enough without tempting fate. As you pass a row of houses near the river, the wind carries snippets of conversation from open windows. Someone singing a lullaby, someone reading aloud from the newspaper, someone shouting about rent. You realize that you are the silent thread weaving these stories together, invisible yet essential. Without you, none of these words would reach their mark. Historians still argue whether the Victorian postal system truly democratized communication or merely expanded bureaucracy in a more charming envelope. You have no strong opinion, except that bureaucracy never trudged 5 miles in the rain. At the next door, a young maid opens just wide enough for her hand to appear. You glimpse ink stains on her fingers, a secret writer, perhaps. She thanks you in a whisper and slips a coin into your palm. "That's not necessary," you murmur, but she insists. Her eyes dart nervously toward the hallway behind her, where a stern voice calls her name. You tip your cap and walk on, pretending not to notice the blush in her cheeks. Maybe the letter she sent was to a soldier, or a poet, or both. The city hums around you, a mixture of progress and decay. Carriages rattle over cobblestones, chimney smoke curls into the air, and the faint clang of the blacksmith's hammer echoes like a heartbeat. London breathes, exhales, and occasionally coughs. A quirky tidbit from your training comes to mind. Postmen were advised to avoid undue familiarity with household staff, lest they distract from the moral tone of the post office. The irony isn't lost on you, an organization that traffics in secrets, warning against curiosity. Still, you follow the rule mostly. By now, your boots are soaked again, and your satchel has lightened. You've delivered news of marriages, deaths, and one small miracle, a letter addressed simply to the man with the blue umbrella. Somehow you found him, sitting on a bench by the bakery, umbrella in hand, as described. He grinned, astonished, as if fate itself wore a uniform. You walked away smiling, for reasons you can't quite name. There's something strangely beautiful in anonymity. You're the middleman of history, unseen but vital. You'll never be thanked in speeches, but when someone presses a freshly written envelope into your gloved hand, you feel it. A quiet acknowledgement that without you, their story might never find its way home. And as you turn down yet another narrow lane, the faint smell of rain returning to the air, you realize this job is less about letters and more about carrying pieces of human connection, fragile, folded, and entrusted to your care. Rain again. It begins without ceremony, just a whisper against your cap, a few reluctant drops that soon gather courage and tumble in sheets. The streets glisten like liquid coal. You adjust your satchel, tug your collar up, and keep walking. A postman doesn't stop for weather. He doesn't stop for anything, really. Rain, dogs, or social revolution, letters must move. By the 1870s, Britain had perfected that stubborn efficiency. The penny post had matured into a sprawling organism, millions of letters pulsing through the veins of the nation every week. You are one of its cells, trudging through puddles with the measured patience of someone who's long ago accepted that his socks will never be dry again. The soundscape changes in the rain. Horses snort, wheels hiss, and umbrellas bloom like black flowers. Children shout, splashing through puddles, earning scoldings that dissolve into laughter. The postman, though, is both part of this world and outside it. You are seen, but not really noticed, an unremarkable hero in wet boots. Your next stop? Number 47, where a dog the size of a cannonball guards the gate. You can see him before you hear him, glaring through the iron bars with the righteous fury of a creature born to hate uniforms. You take a deep breath. Every postman has one nemesis. Yours just happens to have teeth and a sense of vengeance. The trick, you've learned, is confidence. Approach slowly, avoid eye contact, and never, under any circumstances, run. You hold out a letter and say softly, "Good boy," as though you believe it. The dog growls anyway. You slip the envelope through the slot, step back with exaggerated calm, and only when you're 10 paces away do you let out the breath you were holding. A small, soaked victory. You smile to yourself. There's humor even in the misery. You once read in the Illustrated London News that postmen were among the most bitten professionals in Britain, just after chimney sweeps and moral philosophers. Some wag in the office keeps a tally on the wall titled Canine Engagements. You're currently at 3. Historians still argue whether the public's affection for postmen in the Victorian era was genuine or simply born of convenience. After all, it's easier to like the man who brings your love letters than the one who collects your taxes. Yet in most neighborhoods, the postman was indeed loved, or at least tolerated with fond resignation. Children waved, maids gossiped, and lonely widows offered warm biscuits for the road. You sometimes think of those biscuits when trudging through the rain like this, the way the butter crumbles, the smell of cinnamon that sticks to your gloves. Food always tastes better when given out of kindness rather than duty. Another mainstream fact drifts through your tired mind. The introduction of postal districts in 1857. London divided into neat zones, N, E, S, W, as though the chaos of humanity could be organized by compass points. You deliver in the north, though sometimes wander beyond, following routes older than reason. Maps are suggestions. Instinct is law. Your bag slaps gently against your hip with each step, lighter now, but soaked through. You imagine each envelope sighing, "Nearly there," like small, patient ghosts. Water blurs the ink on one. Darling Mary dissolves into Daring Mar. Somewhere, an entire romance redefined by weather. You chuckle softly. A quirky tidbit you recall from the depot gossip. During especially bad storms, some postmen were rumored to deliver from pub to pub, taking shelter and liquid encouragement between rounds. Whether myth or truth, you can see the appeal. If only your supervisor didn't count your route time with near religious precision. By afternoon, the rain eases into drizzle. You pass a row of modest cottages where the air smells of wet stone and chimney soot. A woman sweeping her step nods at you in silent gratitude, her broom dripping with rain. You nod back, no words needed. The exchange feels timeless. The penny post, cheap as it was, changed more than communication. It democratized emotion. The poor could now confess, propose, mourn, and rejoice in ink. You think of all the stories that might have otherwise gone unsent. Somewhere out there, a factory girl writes to her sweetheart by candlelight, and you are the fragile bridge between their hearts. As the clouds part and weak sunlight filters through, the puddles reflect a kinder sky. Your uniform steams faintly, and the streets smell of iron and fresh beginnings. You walk slower now, savoring the quiet. By the time you reach the end of your route, your fingers are pruned, your boots squelch, and your heart feels oddly full. There's satisfaction and persistence in seeing a job through regardless of discomfort. The city exhales around you, the day softening into the kind of stillness that follows effort. You think, not for the first time, that this is what duty really means. Not grand speeches or medals, but showing up every day, in the rain, with a smile that might just outlast the weather. Evening arrives like a sigh.
The sky folds itself into deep grays and purples, and the gas lamps sputter to life with that familiar hiss, casting halos on the slick cobblestones. You can feel the day loosening its grip as your last few letters rattled softly in the satchel like pebbles in a tin pail. Your boots ache, your shoulders throb, but there's comfort in the repetition, the quiet, methodical rhythm of the final rounds. You make your way through one of the wealthier streets now, where iron gates gleam and garden paths smell faintly of damp roses. The difference between this world and the poorer lanes of the morning feels almost absurd, but you tread both with the same respect. A letter is a letter, no matter the sender's shoes. At number 11, a butler opens the door with a look that suggests he'd rather be speaking to anyone else. You hand over a small stack addressed in thick, confident handwriting, and he nods curtly. Inside, laughter ripples faintly from a parlor, an orchestra of good fortune you'll never join. You tip your cap and move on, the warmth of that world vanishing behind the heavy oak door. You pause for a moment at the corner, stretching your back. The city sounds different now, less urgent, more human. Laughter from a tavern, the distant clatter of hooves, the low hum of people returning home. Somewhere a piano plays a waltz through an open window, and for a heartbeat you almost forget that you're standing in the middle of London, soaked and tired. You're just part of the music. A mainstream historical note drifts through your mind as you watch the smoke rise above the rooftops. By the late Victorian period, London's postal network had grown so vast that there were up to 12 deliveries a day in some districts. 12! Imagine the patience, or madness, required for that. You smile wryly, thinking you'd be lucky to survive too. You reach your final house just as the first stars peek through the smog. It's small, humble, with ivy climbing up the bricks and a lantern swinging gently by the door. The name on the envelope reads Mr. Elijah Price. You knock, and an old man appears, wrapped in a worn dressing gown. His eyes light up when you say his name. "Ah," he says, "it's from my granddaughter." His hands tremble as he takes the letter, voice soft with gratitude. You step back, watching him disappear into the glow of his front room. You'll never know what those words say, but you can guess. Love, perhaps, or forgiveness, or simply, "I miss you." Whatever it is, it matters to him, and by extension, it matters to you. There's a gentle pride that hums under your ribs as you turn toward home. The bag is empty, your duty complete, and for a moment the city itself seems to nod in approval. The lamps flicker in rhythm with your footsteps. The air hums low and content, and everything feels suspended in a soft, endless present. Historians still argue whether the Victorian postman was a mere cog in the industrial machine or a quiet symbol of trust and connection. You know the truth lies somewhere in between. You weren't a hero, not exactly, but you were the keeper of countless small miracles, the messenger who carried joy and sorrow with equal care. You pass a bakery closing up for the night, the smell of bread still sweet in the air. The baker waves, and you wave back, wordlessly bound by the shared exhaustion of honest work. The rain has stopped completely now, and the cobblestones glisten like black glass. Somewhere, a church bell strikes 9. You walk on, past the foggy windows, past the street vendors packing up their wares, past the laughter fading into night. You are tired, yes, but it's the good kind of tired, the kind that makes the world feel earned. And when you finally turn the corner toward home, you realize something quietly profound. Though you've delivered other people's stories all day, the one you've been living, step by step, breath by breath, is your own. Now slow your steps. The lamps dim behind you, and the city exhales its final sigh of the day. The rain has polished every surface to a soft gleam. Even the puddles seem calmer now, mirrors of a quieter world. You walk slower, letting the rhythm of your breathing match the distant murmur of London at rest. Your satchel, once heavy with letters, swings empty by your side. The strap, worn smooth from countless days, feels almost like a friend now, familiar, reliable, forgiving. You pass through streets that seem to hum with the memory of footsteps, your own and all those who came before. In a few minutes, you'll hang your coat to dry, pour yourself one last cup of tea,
and watch the steam rise like a ghost of the day gone by. You'll think about Mrs. Willoughby, about Percy and his stories, about the man with the blue umbrella, and the dog that never quite liked you, but respected your courage. Outside, the fog gathers again, soft and benevolent this time, wrapping the city in its cool embrace. Somewhere, a clock strikes 10, its chime fading into the hum of the night. You've done enough for one day. The streets will wait, the letters will find their senders, and for now, all you need to do is rest, knowing that in some small, enduring way, you've kept the heartbeat of a city alive. So close your eyes, let the sound of rain linger in your memory, and drift slowly, gently, into the kind of sleep earned only by those who've walked far, worked honestly, and loved quietly.